We're here to talk a little bit more, understand about the NFT journey, talk about different things you can do specifically on the Sui blockchain, and really just take some time to learn about your journey specifically. So if everyone's cool with that, I want to maybe just start with some introductions. So maybe on my side, I'm with the Sui Foundation, focused on product marketing, looking to explore a little bit around different types of use cases, ways you can use the technology in a way that gets to eventual business models. What about yourself?
My name is Kotaro. I'm the co-founder of Studio Mirai. I also do creative stuff, community stuff, and content stuff for Sui.
I love it. I love it. And just a caveat there, not a developer in any sense.
Yes.
We're going to be getting into that point. This is not intended to be a tech talk. This is intended to be more digging into storytelling, digging into branding, that type of stuff. So if you're not a developer, don't worry. This is the talk for you. So,
and randomly in the middle, we might throw up some Pokemon cards.
It's always a part of it. So, cool. Well, so with that, you gave us a little bit of your background. Maybe let's go a little bit deeper. So when you're thinking about your Web3 journey, we're thinking about how we've all got here. We all have different paths of how we've joined, whether it's recently, whether you've been here for the years and years to come. These journeys are always very different, and so it's really great to hear from your side, you working with your brother specifically. How did that come to be? How did you get into the space where you are now?
Yeah, so I kind of started Web3, because of my brother. If you guys know BL on Twitter, he talks a lot of stuff on Twitter. And he was the CTO, so he's always been tech heavy, and I'm like the creative heavy brother. And around 2019, he asked me to get in these digital assets, stuff like that, because he was already working in blockchain. So we wanted to do something, a little bit of a family business. So we gave it a try. We started Studio Mirai as a IP storytelling project, actually. No utility. The only utility was having a story, having an IP. We had a writer who's actually one of my best friends, Mike, Aldis on Twitter for people that know him. And basically, we had to decide how we wanted to create value without any funding, because we started off fresh, no knowledge. How do we build worth? So we decided to focus and double down on community building and IP. So that's kind of how the story started.
Sure.
Community building has always been something that I've been passionate about. Back in college, I was part of the Asian American Student Association. I always hosted a bunch of events. So I kind of want to bring that vibe here. We started by really grassrooting, white gloving people into the community, and that's kind of how it began.
No, there's a couple words you said that really resonated with me. There was community, there was storytelling, even components that weren't mentioned, but really kind of implied around like a mission specifically. A lot of those things really stood out to me. And the reason why, just for context, so I've been in the industry, specifically in the space, since around like 2016. So I've seen a little bit of the ups and downs of cycles. And I've always been very interested on like the staying power. So what keeps people around? Is it just always the tech? Is it always like personal kind of greed-oriented motivations? Or is there a story? Is there a purpose of why we do things? And for you specifically, from like my familiarity with your project, I've seen a lot of like how there's an anchoring story to a lot of how your releases end up going around with the story of Nezumo. I would kind of love to learn a little bit more around the story. How does everything anchor around that? How does it keep people in the ecosystem and just anchored to like a longer term purpose?
Yeah, so there's kind of two parts to that. So the story of Nozomi was originally a place where the original collection, which is called a Tamashi, 100 one-of-ones, that's how we kind of built the foundation of our entire community. Basically, holders were able to choose how their character developed within the story if they held the NFT. And the impact from that was that people felt like they were actually connected to their assets. But unfortunately, back then, they didn't own it. IPFS storage, we can talk about that later.
For sure.
And the story of Nozomi sort of got people wanting kind of like assembling not assembling, becoming their character. And people were getting attached. They wouldn't sell, like stuff like that. And it started kind of going crazy, that people were just in love with the IP, in love with the story. For people that are coming later to our events, we have these. Oh, no, you're wearing it.
That's right.
We have this,
That's right.
This manga tee. We are actually converting our entire story into a manga right now. So that will be ready probably around September for people that don't want to read. But wait, what was it? Did I answer the question?
Yeah, no, it was around like kind of the story and kind of the affinity to that story as well.
Yeah. So like the second part of that was sort of like the mission statement of Mirai.
Exactly.
Why do people stick around?
Right.
So I think like when we started building at the kind of like middle of the bear, or like the beginning of the bear. And that's when we started building. So there were a lot of people that were sad and always looking at their bags, and that's not the kind of energy that we wanted to build. We were really focused on building a safe space. You come in here, you just hang out, talk about your life, join a Discord, open some Pokemon cards, join some games. Like, that's kind of how it started.
Right.
And now that we're 3 years in, that type of mentality of like not really caring what's going on outside has kind of embedded into everyone that joins, and everyone just shares it like organically now.
So I really appreciate the idea of like not only the story in itself and the longevity of that story, how it sticks around through various cycles, but even just the courage to really start your project in a bear market specifically. For people that are familiar with previous cycles, like how they've come to be, and the kind of the mentality of how they're approached, you usually see a lot more of the tech building, the infrastructure side. It's very developer favoring. And so to find something where you might have to like establish more of a non-technical story and get people to buy into that in an area where like they might be a bit more pessimistic to the industry more broadly, I think that's something that can't really be undersold. Mm-hmm. So, with that, like you've continued to progress, like you've seen a lot of your projects progressively start to come to fruition. I'd love to maybe talk a little bit more about your most recent project. For anyone that saw on the icons originally that were presented, the Permissionless like project has been something where this community building concept has really come to the forefront, and how people really anchor on how you present yourself, your digital brand collectively. How is this project going to evolve your approach and how you interact with your community?
Yeah, so for the Permissionless project, some of the community's NFTs are black and white. Some of them are colored. So basically, you have to use our like engagement token to color them in, and you can only get it by engaging. So basically, the utility of it is just coloring like a coloring book, and it's sort of blown up because I feel like people are too obsessed with utility that isn't really utility.
Sure.
Right. It's like for me, my most important utility that I always try to put in is emotional utility. I think that's the most important one.
Sure.
And like when these people support you for the emotional aspect of it, coloring a PFP, like that's
yeah.
It's like so basic, but at the same time, it gives people so much happiness seeing it come to life. We actually have a level 2 coloring coming soon, where you can literally customize every single piece of color on the piece. They're also 4K on chain, which is first of its kind. But
totally, totally. Well, so what I'm hearing then is that like there's not only this idea of just like evolving art, like seeing like changes, customizations, the evolution beyond just your initial piece of art that was created in the launch.
Yeah.
But also, there's an underlying technology story that is something that I've always looked at thematically, is that great tech does not necessarily need to be at the forefront. So the idea of even you being able to evolve, like add more colors, like see things change, this dynamic nature to it, that's the underlying technology, but it's not necessarily the storytelling side of things.
But we have great tech too.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is where your brother comes in.
Yeah.
So, but that's really kind of been like a theme in general, is that, and this is more of a comment to the broader audience here for a lot of people that aren't necessarily technical. Tech is going to be necessarily foundational to be able to do cool things, right? When you look at the evolution of like a digital image or whatever type of asset you're like necessarily working with, you need foundational tech. You need the ability to store 4K on chain. You need the flexibility of how NFTs work. All of those foundationally from a tech side are critical. But at the same time, though, the branding and everything that comes with it is critical, because you're not just looking at a one-off launch where you launch it and you forget about it. This is something where you're building a longer-term community, where you need to look at ways of how you interact with that community, how you think about the designing, the storytelling. All of those pieces have to come in, because this is a longer-term commitment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, with that, we've seen NFTs around since 2021. They've been around since originally the boom happened. Like, they were very minimal in terms of what they were accomplishing. People were more exploring around the concept. But now we're about 2 years in. So, I'm curious, you've kind of seen some of this progression happen, you and your brother as well. How do you think that NFTs have really evolved in terms of like the use, the perception of it, the positive, negative side of things, the buzzwords even? Like, how has that evolved over the last 2 years?
I think you can kind of look at how projects have adapted. Like the bigger projects from ETH. You have the Bored Apes, you have the Punks, you have Azuki, Pudgy. I think like since then, people have cared more about how the outside thinks than how the inside thinks.
Sure.
So like, take Pudgy as their best example. Their whole thing is Instagram marketing. Their shorts are super viral, and that's how they kind of get their IP out there.
Right.
And I actually think that, like with us, we had very tech focused in the beginning, like super tech focused. We can do this, we can do this, you can do this, and then I'm trying to tell my mom, and she's like, she has too much and lost in the private key right now. She doesn't remember the C phrase.
That's a good son move. That's a good son move.
And like, there is just so much like constraint since those days. And like now I see like as people progress, you see it with Zuki, they're making like an anime with their IP. Like people can actually, outside of this whole space, like they know that we exist. Right?
So that's something that stands out to me, and I think we're thinking in the same direction, was like this idea, you had mentioned it about engagement, like kind of the relationship that you're having, like an expectation that this isn't like a one-off thing, but rather looking at like consistent ways to find connection points with your community.
Yeah.
Like that's something where I'm seeing a lot more of it, where like when you look at some of the initial launches, yeah, there are a few of like the one-offs that really just establish community pretty organically, the Bored Apes and whatnot. Those have stuck around and are pretty present in a lot of the conference scene. But a lot of these initial one-offs that happen on the smaller and medium scale, they fizzled out because there wasn't this longer-term roadmap of, where do I want to take this, like 3 months down? Where do I want to take this 6 months?
Right.
All of that collectively was just missing because it was like, this is an opportunity and I want to meet that opportunity quickly, but I don't know where I want to go with it afterwards.
Yeah.
That was something I always felt was generally missing, not only on the indie side, but even the enterprise side. There were things like Macy's and some of these larger organizations where they were Porsche, exactly, a lot of the fashion brands as well. They tried it, but then they didn't know what they wanted to do with it, or they weren't willing to take that big next step to explore how could this be a part of my business model and how can I build a business model around it. Yeah, so that's really something that stood out, and I'm even kind of curious to see, like, we're 2 years into the NFC cycle, like, how could that progress even 2 years down the road? What are things that are still missing? Like, those are questions that are still at the top of my mind.
Gaming,
for sure.
Sui Play.
Cool. So that's even something where when we think about the future of NFTs, and that's a really good segue, is we hear about different use cases. We hear about NFTs used as a use case.
Yeah.
In reality, NFTs are just a vehicle to enable other use cases. Right? They enable better experiences with gaming. They enable better commerce. They enable better types of payments. They enable loyalty. Like there's all these different more use. Exactly. Yeah. They're more use cases. And if we think about NFTs purely as just a piece of technology and a vehicle to enable those use cases, we open a lot of doors about really what's possible. And again, it brings on more of the values of consumer engagement, loyalty, some of those components that is really the sweet spot, I'd imagine, to where NFTs come into play.
Yeah.
Art comes into that because art is the use case, NFTs are the vehicle.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. So, I mean, I'm really kind of curious then, you've been in the game for a bit, like you've really seen a little bit on both sides. Even when you look within like not only the Sui community, but broader the Web3 community, do you kind of see any mistakes, any things that you think people could be doing better, lessons that you've taken in your journey?
Yeah.
What would you part on the community here?
Yeah, I think like for me, 3 years, so a little bit of background, I came in like not knowing anything about blockchain or anything like that. The only person that kind of guided me was my brother. So like I think for people that are coming in for the first time, they really need that one person, or else it's like you want to do something, you actually don't know how to do it, like you always need some sort of mentor. So I'm really happy that my brother was there to be my mentor. But like I think there's like two really big lessons that I've learned that I see that like we've, as Mirai has kind of used, is adaptation and communication.
Sure.
So adaptation is, so we have no roadmap. Roadmaps I think are overrated. And I think, especially for NFT projects where you can't predict, right?
Fair.
And for us, we always had to adapt. Coloring was kind of adapted. The story was always adapted. We had a lot of things that we wanted to do before that just wasn't possible with the amount of people that we had. We didn't want to promise anything too much. So like going with a model of like under promising, over delivering, I think it's just always better.
Yeah.
And then communication. So I think it's the thing I like to tell people is one day in crypto is 1 week in real life is like a month in crypto.
Yeah.
1 month in real life is like soft rug in crypto. So like,
Right.
there's a lot of people that just because you're building doesn't mean you can't engage with people. Like you can talk to people, you can host spaces, you can talk to people in your Discord. Like we've been talking to people like nonstop for 3 years.
Yeah.
Like, at one point, we were hosting events every single day for 2 years.
Yeah.
Between 2 hours and 8 hours every single day.
100%. You know, one thing that's really stood out to me was like people look at it almost as like a barrier where for you, like you had your brother provided some of the technical balance to more of your creative brand. And so you had that ability to take that step and start to, you know, have someone that you could tag team with and explore.
Yeah.
Now, some people will be able to find that naturally. Some people will have the gumption to be able to go step out of their zone and reach out to people and find that community.
Yeah.
But even like I would even argue that someone that, let's just say they are just an artist, even just those functions and those skill sets are very much lacking in the industry more broadly. People look at it as like, if I don't have technical skills, you know, I don't have a place in this space. And when in reality, I'd say that's incredibly far from the truth.
Yeah. I think like for me, like starting off in this space 3 years ago, I was extremely introverted. I was so awkward. I was that guy that I would try to step in a conversation and they were like, oh, hi, I'm Kotaro. These are nice napkins. like super awkward.
Yeah.
And like I sort of had to adapt.
Yeah.
Because Brian was even more introverted. He's a tech guy.
Sure.
He doesn't really do the BD. So I had to I was forced to learn it in order for my project to grow.
Yeah.
So I went to every single builder house. I talked to as many people as I can, try to be less awkward. Like 3 years ago, I wouldn't be able to sit here.
Yeah.
I'll just be like,
and here we
hey,
are dancing in the
hello.
background.
I'm dancing, giving Pokemon cards to the audience. So like, I think stepping out of your comfort zone, like you have to do it. Like
Totally.
If you're building a project, if you're a founder, like it's not a choice. If you sign up to be a founder, you have to do it.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Now, I mean, you specifically in a lot of like your approaches and the way that you think about the branding inside, you're very good at thinking outside the box. Some of the tactics that you do, the way you approach your community, you know, it goes beyond just your traditional like post on Twitter, like write a blog post or whatnot. Like you find unique ways on almost a daily basis, and we're seeing it today, of how do I engage and like just maintain unity and like collectivity with your community.
Yeah.
And so like, if let's say someone that like has more of a traditional marketing background, they're thinking about the more traditional marketing tactics, like how do you always like stay inspired, stay creative? Like how are you always thinking about things like this in more of an out of the box mindset?
I mean, for me, like my community knows I'm a troll. So like, and as long as we're having fun, as long as people remember, because like if you're doing the same marketing as everyone else, no one's gonna remember you.
Totally.
Like you have to do something different. You have to stand out, right?
Yeah.
Or else, what's the point of doing it?
Totally.
So like, wait, what was the question?
No, it's just like your creative approach to it, and just like how you maintain that.
Yeah, how I maintain it. Always having, like for me, I always have a community to fall on. Like
Sure.
if I do something stupid, they're like, okay, this is stupid, but this is funny because it's Kotaro.
Yeah.
So they'll help me like support it and stuff like that. But how do I?
Well, I mean, I think it's just really you lean into who you are and like the
Yeah.
brand that you've built, and
Yeah.
I think you found ways to just kind of stay within those lines, but then continuing to expand. I mean, the Pokemon cards is a great example of that. Like, you found things where people really attach them to who you are in your community, and they resonate with that.
Yeah. I think for me, like for the Prime Motion, for example, it's kind of taking it back to like manga being black and white, going into color, going into anime.
Sure.
So people that generally like the Prime Motion, like either Pokemon cards, One Piece cards, some sort of Japanese culture, maybe they watch Naruto or Dragon Ball when they grew up. So for me, when we started doing these culture boxes, we gave away these boxes of cards to people, and they're like, holy crap, like, I haven't seen this since I was a kid. I'm like, those were NFTs.
Yeah.
Technically, they were RNG, they were random, and like, them bringing it back. Like, I have so many people in my community that forgot about like, their addiction, and now because of me,
I love that.
They found their childhood back.
You found that niche, like that resonance with something, and you really leaned into it. You weren't trying to just tackle some like crazy buzzword or like trying to lean in exclusively to the tech. You found something that really touched someone's heart and like they connected with, and they stuck around, and you just kept like digging in and finding ways to expand, finding ways to storytell around that, really establish a consistent brand, which is something I've seen a lot from what you do. So, you know, as we're looking to close this out, you know, and we're looking at like this group of potential NFT builders or even just like community members that aren't, again, very technical, Is there any bits of like advice or like resources that you would like to see if you were like going through the same cycle again? Like, what advice would you part on these people, or what resources do you feel like the foundation could help to encourage to find the next Studio Mirai?
I think for foundation, I think we spoke about it a little bit last night, was pretty much having these resources available, whether it's for marketing, whether it's for legal, whether it's for social, whether it's for tech, having these resources, because Sui Foundation is already like super supportive.
Yeah.
Like shout out to Christina. I know she's not here, but shout out to Christina. But like, I think having those resources available for people to kind of access, I think is really good.
Yeah. Yeah, well, here's to hoping that we can find more projects that are able to take it all the way, because you've definitely shown the balance of not just the tech, but just a broader business model, which I'm really encouraged to see.
Yes, sir.
Cool. Well, thank you guys so much, and thanks for listening. We're here to learn a little bit more about Prime Mission, and I hope this helped.